are listening to the Amoda Maa podcast. In this series, Amoda explores her essential teaching through conversation and excerpts from interviews and events. To find out more about events and to sign up for her newsletter, go to www.amodamaa.com. Please subscribe, comment and share if this podcast moves you. And if you feel called to donate, please go to the website. Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy. Greetings. Welcome back to another Amoda Maa podcast with me, Kavi, and Amoda Maa. Hello, Amoda.
Hello, Kavi.
Okay, so today we are going to explore the possibility of meeting life experience, inner and outer, from a deeper place, a place of non-reactivity. I'm going to start today's exploration with a little poem that I wrote actually just today during one of our online gatherings that seemed appropriate to talk of at the time. Let me read this very short 5-line poem, and then we'll explore. The storm rages. The lighthouse stands rooted in stillness, casting its light into the darkness. Is it possible, Amoda? And for what purpose? Is it useful? Is it possible to meet the world, the inner world, the world of our inner experience, and the outer world, the world of our, the world that we experience? And maybe they're the same, and we can explore that. Is it possible to meet the world, as we'll call it, from a deeper place? And this is the hub of it, a place of non-reactivity, and whatever that might mean, might involve, and for what purpose? What's the benefit? Is it useful? Is it possible? The world is tenacious, as Arjuna, I think it was almost one of Arjuna's phrases. The world is tenacious, capricious, he said. At least as far as we know, he probably didn't say that. The world is capricious. It keeps coming. It keeps coming. The storm rages, the inner storm and the outer storm. It's relentless. We live in the world. We're not in the Himalayas. We're not in a cave. We're in the practical world. Yet still, the question arises, is it possible to meet this world from a deeper place? A place of non-reactivity. And why?
Not only is it possible to meet the world, our world, the world that we experience from a deeper place, which we'll explore what that means. Not only is it possible, but it's imperative. Imperative should we take up the invitation. Imperative when we've seen through the futility of trying to fix the world or control the world, our world, the world that I experience, trying to fix it or control it from the superficial being from the periphery of ourselves, from the self that wants it to be a certain way and therefore attempts to control it. And the attempt to control it also means to control how we feel about it, control our feelings, because the world we experience is not just the facts, what's happening or not happening, it's how we feel about what's happening or not happening. And that's where the futility of trying to control how we feel about it, or trying to change the circumstances so that we feel or don't feel, so that we feel something that we want to feel, happiness or whatever it might be, success, security, but we don't want to feel heartbreak, or we don't want to feel uncertainty. The futility of trying to control how we feel, once that's been seen through, it becomes possible to start meeting our experience from a deeper place. So when we say the futility is that all attempts to repress or deny or avoid or control or overcome in some way how we feel, our direct feeling sense in the midst of life, is counterproductive, because we end up constricting ourselves, contracting ourselves. And if things challenge this small space that we've put ourselves in, then we become reactive, or we become overly fearful or overly anxious, trying to protect this small space that we've condensed ourselves into. And who suffers in that? We suffer in that. Yeah. So in that sense, we can, it's imperative in the sense for our own well-being on all levels, emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual, to see through that strategy of control that isn't serving anything. It serves neither the individual, nor does it serve the world, nor does it serve others. And to start to come to a place within ourselves where we can discover within ourselves what is vaster or more spacious than that very condensed or restricted sense of self that's in opposition to its own experience, in opposition to life, in opposition to what's happening. So we start to come to the possibility of undoing that tight fist within ourselves, the clenched fist, the tension, the agitation, the making an enemy out of our own experience. That's the beginning of awakening out of the identification with ego self. Yeah.
So you were talking then really about the inner world. What I'm trying to get to is the hub of the part of the hub of part of the spiritual problem, particularly a non-dual sort of problem, is that what to do about the world.
Well,
sorry, but the world, everything gets split up into right and wrong in the world, and as we experience it, we become, there's a danger of being reactive and righteous, or wrongous, but righteous. And, there are a lot of people who struggle with this dilemma of where to kind of go, hold, yes, but that's just wrong.
Yes, and that's exactly what we're speaking of. That's exactly what I was attempting to point to, that righteousness, which comes from that tight knot of self that does not want to feel or experience that this is what's happening. And I have a felt response to it. A felt response to it does not mean a reactive response. A reactive response is a thought response. It's wrong. That's reactive.
Right. Okay. Good.
It's a felt response. But a reactive response, which is a thought response, which ends up as an opinion or a righteousness, a position taking, is actually a strategy to avoid the felt sense. Yes, there may be injustice in the world, and of course there is. Yes, there is whatever we see, corruption, greed, and so on, heartbreak, suffering, and all of this, division. Nobody's saying that's right. But it is as it is. It is happening in the world right now. And perhaps it's always been happening, at least as far as we can see.
Sadly, yes.
Our felt response to that is not reactive. It hurts. It touches us. It breaks our hearts. Maybe it confuses us. Maybe there's a sense of helplessness. What can I do? Why is it like this? And so on. This is more honest than taking up a position of righteousness. The taking up a position of righteousness creates an enemy out of what is. Creates an enemy out of the fact of what is. It is as this right now. That's all we can know and truly say, honestly. And to make an enemy out of it and say it shouldn't be happening, whilst on one level that's true. Of course, who wants suffering and division and corruption and all of this stuff? But it is happening. Yeah, the forces that come into play historically, galactically, culturally, the many forces that have karmically that have brought this about. So it is the way it is right now. So first of all, before we jump to making an enemy out of what is, we need to feel our response to it, to feel the honesty of it, which is really a heart response. Then that starts to allow us to meet it from a deeper place than the reactive self. The reactive self simply creates suffering for itself and for those around it, perpetuates what we call the pain body in me. And the pain body in the environment, yeah. So, that's why it's imperative. It's imperative, yeah.
So in a way, what you're pointing to is if there are any steps, which there aren't really, but is without the human being, which is part this transformational path, without the human being prepared to fully feel that the feelings are the doorway to going deeper. That in itself is a profound journey, right? Because we spend our lives, and we're all very trained in spending our lives avoiding fully feeling whatever suffering or whatever it is, everything. Yeah, mostly everything to do with our own personal lives and to do with the collective lives, because we're almost trained to believe that we can't go there. We've got to keep these things away. And this is which creates then a shadow and which creates a reactivity. We live in a reactive world, period.
Yes.
And so the first step would be allowing that in to the extent that we can.
Yes. I mean, we're talking, to put it in its context, about an inner transformation first, before anything can truly change in the world, whether that world is our immediate environment of relationships, and the bigger environment, and the world on a collective level. First, the inner transformation. And then from that place, we can meet the world differently, and change can be effective, if you like. So yes, and the first step to inner transformation is, first of all, feeling, not emotion, but feeling. As you say, what we may call the ego structure, it is always trying to avoid, or reject, according to its own conditioning and what it's learnt and what it's absorbed, what its defenses are, and so on, is attempting to employ many strategies of defense or armoring and control against reality, against the fact of what I'm experiencing. And that creates the armoring of the heart. That creates the sort of shell of the self, which becomes usually a shell of opinion, of position taking, of me against that, of me against you, of seeing an enemy, and so on. In all aspects of life, this then becomes a prison, the prison of self. And so we may begin what we might call an inner journey, or a spiritual journey even, but we don't even have to make it a spiritual journey, because many people don't even want to.
No.
Yeah, that's not, but we can, each of us, every individual, spiritual or unspiritual, start to become more honest and more intimate with the truth of what we feel. That's already a dropping in from the mind sort of structure, which is what I call the periphery, the superficial, the thought activity, into the deeper self, which is the heart first, where we start to feel. I feel, wow. Whatever it is, I always come back to, it's really a heartbreak. Initially, it's felt as heartbreak. The heart starts to break open, whereas once it was closed. That's the beginning of the inner transformation.
Why is it so difficult? Why do people find this? What kind of monster have we created, en masse? That is more willing to rise up into its reactivity of the individual and collective self, because it's just the same thing, rather than going, a little bit deeper down into the, as you say, into the heart or into the deeper feeling. Why? What the hell? I mean, have we created a kind of Frankenstein out of ourselves that doesn't allow this kind of deeper feeling? Because, I mean, in my personal experience, I've only come into life, into truth, as that's actually happened. Before, I was a parody. I was a joke. I was an actor. I was a facsimile. I was an avoider. I was an addict. I was anything. I didn't even know there was a doorway. I didn't even know that's what I was doing. Maybe that's the thing. I wasn't even aware. And then when I became aware, it actually took me quite a long time, and it was really, very difficult to open up this thing. What the hell? Amoda?
Yeah, well, I don't have the answer to that. I mean, if we look at it from the very broad perspective, or the perspective of, let's say, consciousness, or the let's call it the unmanifest, as the unmanifest manifests into many parts, it seems to lose itself in those many parts, and individually and collectively, it becomes a sort of manifestation of not knowing its true nature as the unmanifest. And so it's like consciousness gets lost in form, and that gives rise to unconsciousness, which is what we're talking about. And then it sort of is sort of amplified, because one unconscious supports the other unconscious. And what is unconsciousness? It's forgetting who you are, forgetting your essential nature. So you become identified with your role. You become identified with your thought forms. You become identified with your emotion forms, which are reactive. And the whole of society, which is a massive unconsciousness, and the whole of culture, and then the history and the generations and so on, are amplifying that. So we come to only, well, we don't know ourselves, but we've become lost in the identification with our form identity. This body, this thought, this mind, this opinion, and the whole of education and the whole of the family dynamic supports that. So we're supported in what we know, in what we think, in what we believe, in how we present ourselves, in what roles we play in life, and so on and so on. And then when that's finally become a prison and there's no real satisfaction or nourishment or peace in that, or happiness in that, then we start on an inner journey, and we come back to the uncovering of what we really are, which can't be another belief system, but the journey has to start with the undoing of everything that has become a layer and upon layer of facsimile. Yeah, and that's the way it is. And perhaps as we wake up to that true self, then we meet ourselves, we meet the world, and perhaps if we do have children, we meet our children as that. And of course, the education would need to support it, the society would need to support that, and perhaps that's something that may or may not happen as we evolve as humanity. And then something starts to change, perhaps.
There has been this, in a way, this has been pointed to through religion, which I'm not a big fan of, but it has been pointed to in the way that sin has been, sold in a way, but actually even the idea of sin, although it's been bastardized in many ways and used as a stick to beat people down rather than lift people up, in its essence, it actually has a truth, doesn't it? Because to sin is to err, and to err is to forget.
Yes.
So, which is what you were talking about. So actually, a lot of religions have been pointing in their purest sense to the very thing that we're talking about. We've all forgotten. There's the great forgetting again. We've talked about this before.
Yes. And if we put it in an even broader context than that, is it not possible, and we can't absolutely know perhaps, but is it not possible that even this is as it is, in the sense that the purpose of life may, this is just a possibility to consider, may not be to have a perfect world, but the purpose of life is for the unmanifest to come to know itself, or to remember itself through the manifest. So the whole purpose of life is for us to wake up to this. It's a whole soul's journey. Yeah. So the question is like, why is it so difficult? Why do we have to go on this journey? Wouldn't it be so much easier or more beautiful or more perfect if we were born as this knowing? Well, perhaps that may happen at some point on our evolutionary journey. But right now, this is where we are. And perhaps right now, this is the perfect evolutionary expression of consciousness or beingness coming to know itself through unconsciousness. Yeah, through that unconsciousness, through the erring, the sin, the forgetting, to come to remember itself. And through that is an evolution of consciousness. That may be possible. I like to think so. I like to feel so.
Well, yeah, that was a kind of future. There's a future pull in that, and it is part of the human experience to look at the individual and the broader suffering, and to want to do something about it, and that's a noble. In its essence, it's actually a noble pull, and it's a noble thought, and it's not, it doesn't work to kind of override it in some kind of extreme spiritual sort of way, but the very pull to either ameliorate or do away with suffering, as if it could be done away with, which is doubtful from where I'm standing, because the nature of life is kind of suffering, but. I'm not really saying anything big. I'm just saying the pull of the human in the context of what you just said. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the purpose.
Well, this is the pull. What we may call it a spiritual impulse. We may call it an inner impulse that takes us within to contemplate, inquire into the nature of who I am beneath the layers, and so on and so on. That is what you're speaking of. That is the noble,
the noble path,
impulse to end suffering. Yeah, it may not change or end suffering in the sense of yes, life is birth and death, and there is suffering in that. Life is beginnings and endings, and there is suffering in that. There's a certain level of suffering, which is hatred, greed, corruption, and so on and so on, violence. That may be ended. Yeah, that's unnecessary suffering that comes from unconsciousness. Then the kind of suffering that's sort of underneath that, the birth, death, and all of that, the impermanence of things, that's a different level of suffering, which we cannot erase. So yes, we can address some of those issues of unnecessary suffering, but not through opposition or counter opinion, counter belief that simply perpetuates it. First, the inner transformation, so that we meet others, we meet our experience, we meet ourselves. It has to start within, from that place of non-division, the end of suffering on that level. That's the beginning of it. That's really all we can do. That's where we're at. Yeah. Perhaps then with time, it starts to permeate certain areas of our collective.
Yeah, and so if we were to ask, kind of, for what purpose is this deepening? As you just said, you just explained some of it. It's not. We're not. We are. You are not talking about a place necessarily of non-action. It's not a whatever kind of place. Neither is it a reactive place, because people are called. You're called. You get called. The classic scene of the Mahabharata where Arjuna was called. I mean, he was in a choiceless choice situation. It was an extraordinary piece of work and teaching, as far as in the simple way that I understand it. And he was being drawn into battle to fight with his relations, who he knew he was going to have to go and kill. And in the moment where he was pulled, and he was a noble warrior, he fell into doubt. He fell into selfism. I can't do this. I'm full of confusion. He had to come back to that. And Krishna appeared and talked to him of the nature of reality, the depth of reality, the spheres of reality, to do and to be unattached to the doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so this is partly what we're talking about, to meet the world, the inner and outer world, from a deeper place, a place of non-reactivity.
Yes.
And so it's not non-action.
That's right. That's right. It gets this whole sort of topic or exploration. It gets confused in when we speak about the inner transformation and non-reactivity. Then the let's call it the mind or the self that doesn't truly know its true nature interprets that as, well, then I've got to be passive. Whatever, I abdicate responsibility, or I don't care, and there's a kind of nihilism in that, and so on, and that really is a very erroneous view or understanding. Once like Arjuna, once you've realized true nature and understood the sort of coming and going of all forms and the formless that from which those forms arise, then no action, they're simultaneous in some way. If you take action from a place of non-reactivity, which sort of flummoxes the mind, but you're moving from a natural intelligence. It's a completely different frequency field to the reactive self that wants to that has hatred in it, that has violence. You can actually take action that is very, definite or strong from a place of non-violence. You can say no from a non-violence place. You can also say no from an extremely violent place. They're completely different within oneself. Completely different, and they have a different impact. One adds to the pain body of the collective. One ends the pain body. But always there is a yes and a no. Yes. Always in life. We can't avoid action in life. And yet sometimes no action is the right thing. So we have to really come from that place.
And so in that sense, what Arjuna, many thousands of years ago, what he was kind of dealing with, the dilemma that he was sort of dealing with in its noble way, as we hear. The modern equivalent of that is the nervous system that is in triggered mode for the modern domestic human being. All of us in the Western world, we know, all have this kind of what can be loosely called a pain body, the nervous system that is by its very nature reactive, pulled by the thought, this shouldn't be happening, that shouldn't be happening. And so you can't get to the deeper place without dealing with the nervous system pain body. Is that correct?
Yes, that has to be included. Of course, there are many techniques and methods for meeting and undoing and perhaps letting go some of the trauma in the nervous system and so on. And then the essence of that is, not everybody has to do that work, but we can cut through that, which is the essence of it, which is stop, wait, feel. That's it. Stop, wait, feel. Yeah? Everything else is a knee-jerk reaction, which is an avoidance of the feeling. The nervous system, if you like, is holding trauma because it's unwilling to meet the pain, the hurt that is there, which isn't to do with now, it's to do with then. If you stop, wait, feel, soften, open, allow, then whatever it was that was a trauma then can be met now, and actually it moves through you. What we might say, another way of saying this is space. Allow space in you. Come to be aware of space. Space is the pause. Wait in between thought. Wait in between the density or intensity of emotion. Stop, wait. And then see what's there. This is the beginning of awareness. This is the beginning of spaciousness. This is the beginning of stillness. And each of us has that capacity.
Yes.
You asked, we started this conversation with, is it possible? Yes, of course it's possible.
Yes.
But it's only possible when there's a willingness, when you start to see that this frenetic, frantic, agitated self is the cause of your own suffering, your own tension. Of course, we can't force this upon ourselves or upon anybody, but we can invite it. And each person, like a flower that comes to its blooming, will come to that place in their own time, where this possibility is more available. That we cannot really impose.
No, I think, much as it's a very different environment from the environment that I was in when I was unraveling back in 95, 96, or during the late 90s, where actually I was very isolated in that sense and going through it on my own. And I didn't, although I had a great teacher there, and there was still this sense of just me doing this, and there wasn't a sense of the field. And I'm very interested these days in the impact of the field to actually facilitate what one might almost be able to call a fast track. Because I was on the slow track. I had to go through the histrionics. I had to go through all of the catharsis. And of course, some people do, and you have to keep, you can't neglect or avoid. But my God, it took me a long time and scrabbling in what I felt was the darkness. Whereas now the context is greater. There are a lot of spiritual teachers, no disrespect, but there are a lot of spiritual teachers. There is a big field of energy of people. You go onto social media, and even though it might seem ludicrous and full of hate in some ways, there's also a lot of spiritual wisdom going on there from ordinary people. I'm on Twitter. I've got a Twitter account, and it's very popular. But boy, is there some wisdom out there. Wow, that's ordinary people saying beautiful things about depth that was not accessible 15 years ago, or not because of the social media wasn't around, but because it wasn't in the field. The field is being fed by wisdom, and that has an effect, and there's no reason for it to not spread. Yeah,
I agree. I absolutely agree. Like you, I was very much on my own and doing all the inner work and the catharsis and this, that, and the other. And now, yes, I there is a field, not only because we are immersed in this field, but because there is a field, and we do see it through social media and in ordinary people, and some of it is sort of acquisitive knowledge, and some of it is not. A lot of it is not. It's genuine insights, and that field is around. And even though we see a lot of darkness and an intensification of that darkness in the world and all sorts of horrors, if you like. With that, or by, side by side with that, concurrently, is also an amplification of the field of this availability of coming to this inner transformation more and more in ordinary people, in ordinary ways, which is why we say you don't have to be on a spiritual path as such, although the sort of doorway of the spiritual path is often what brings you to this. But I think more and more people, absolutely. And that's what we do. We're part of that and offering that over and over again. So yes, of course. Yeah, it is possible. And I think that is perhaps a sign or indicative of the evolution of consciousness.
Yes. Or at least the evolution of the human aspect of, or some kind of movement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because definitely, there's the polarization of the world, as it would appear, does seem to be frantically, dancing its dance. And we see that, and you feel that in people, and a lot of people. Actually, people are divided, within themselves, of course, but within the collective, there is a lot of division and a lot of finger pointing, and a lot of, it's all selfing here, and not, it's that can only be, well, it can be for a lot of reasons, and it is, but actually, there is an invitation in that, because the more frantic the self, collective or individual becomes, the more the opportunity to see that it's an illusory self, that it's a dramatic, reactive self, and it's no way to go on. It's impossible to continue going in that direction.
What should we call it? The demon, the shadow, the unconscious pain body, whatever we want to call it, the Mara, is really coming to the surface now to be seen collectively, individually, and perhaps, hopefully, and it's that is the very doorway or the possibility. One can't guarantee anything, but at least there's a possibility. Whereas when it's sort of hidden and playing itself out behind the scenes, then it's much more difficult to see it. The Mara is not here. You've got to see the Mara and meet that Mara from stillness, as the light, the light of consciousness, or the lighthouse that is here. And then the Mara is more likely to be seen for what it is. It dispels the demon. But we have to start within and with our own lives. Yeah.
There's no, I mean, we're having said fast track. There's no shortcut. There might be a fast track, but there's no real shortcut to this, because it has to go in. It has to go in. It has to be dealt with, and whatever's lurking in one's individualness, has to be met. Has to be met. There's no other way, and that's either an easy journey or a difficult journey, and nobody knows. Nobody can predicate that. It might take a short time. It might take a long time. Nobody can predicate that, but it's the opportunity is now. The opportunity is here, as we're seeing in our groups. They're all about this. The world is intensifying, and that means we either get caught in the drama, or we get pulled or mirrored to go deeper inside, and to ask ourselves the question, as great Krishnamurti was all about questions. Is it possible? Is it possible to meet the world, the inner and the outer world, from a deeper place, from that place of non-reactivity, to be the center, if you like, to be the still point, to be the one who's not pulled one way or another? Is it useful? For what purpose? Is it possible? That's the deepest question.
Because the world's been pulled, and the individuals within the world have been pulled this way and that for thousands of years.
Yeah.
It's time to end that drama of push and pull. And
we can only do that
within ourselves, individually.
Exactly.
Individually. Yeah.
So, okay, I think the storm rages. The lighthouse stands rooted in stillness, casting its light into the darkness. I'm rather pleased with that.
It's beautiful. I love it. I love it.
Okay. Well, it was a spontaneous exploration that we hope has stirred you, interested you, excited you, challenged you, pointed you, opened up the field for a deeper exploration. I love these conversations with you, Amoda. They're always very beautiful. And now you are dismissed to spend the rest of the day at your leisure.
Thank you. Beautiful. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Take care, everyone. Please stay with us and look out for the next. Hopefully, we're going to have another guest at some point. We've got some ideas about people to get on the podcast, and we would like to make a year of interesting and vibrant, challenging and innovative podcasts for you. Until then, we bid you farewell. Hope you stay well and be blessed. Namaste.
Namaste.